like I said, there are spiritual paths and they are equally valid and you can follow them. But if you're interested in someone who is not caught up in those differences, who is able to transcend the differences, different traditions, even different religions, who respects other prophets, and who can bring mysticism into your life, help you live it, who can bring God into your life, read Rumi, and you will be amazed. He changed my entire life, and he will do the same to you. Nobody transforms my states, my moods, I mean, as strong as Rumi does. He's amazing. He's unbelievable.
Welcome, modern day mystics, fellow truth seekers. James and Justin back again, and today we have another special guest with us. We have Rasoul Rahbari-Ghazani from his YouTube channel, Rumi's Echoes and Other Philosophies. Now, the channel focuses on Rumi's poetry, similar mystic philosophies, and Islamic mysticism.
Rumi, what an interesting character, like a Islamic mystic.
Yeah.
Pretty excited to get into that topic.
All right, guys. Well, we won't keep you waiting. Let's get into it. Rasoul, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It is a pleasure to have you. We've had to go through a gauntlet here to kind of get connected. There's been a little bit of turmoil trying to get a chance to speak with you, but we finally made it happen. So good to have you on the show. Now, as people who study mysticism, me and Justin on a regular basis, we found your content studying, Rumi's mystic philosophies and other similar philosophies like that. And we thought you'd be a great fit for the show, someone who's really educated on the subject. Let us know a little bit more about someone like Rumi. Maybe to begin things, though, you could tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your passion for Rumi's philosophies and other mystic teachings and stuff like that. So we'll give you the floor, and let's hear what you got to say.
Hello, James. Hello, Justin. Thank you so much for inviting me to Stay Spiritual. I'm truly honored. I'm Rasoul Rahbari-Ghazani. Originally, I'm Iranian, and I did my undergraduate studies in mechanical engineering. I started my master's studies in mechanical engineering, but this time in Istanbul, Turkey. Then I switched my field. I decided to pursue my passion in philosophy, and I did. I graduated from master's with philosophy, then came to philosophy of religion and PhD, about to graduate in a couple of months. The majority of my research is mystic philosophy, specifically Islamic mysticism. Generally, they call it Sufism, but that's just a very particular angle into Islamic mysticism. I also research Christian mysticism, and my area of focus is Persian poetry, Persian mystical philosophical poetry. But I also delve deep into Ibn Arabi's thought. So I think that's all about me. If you have any other questions.
That's a lot. That's a lot of impressive data. Right off the bat, I have a question. These topics that you're talking about, and famous characters like Rumi and subjects like mysticism, which span different religions, like Christian mysticism and Islamic mysticism. What is mysticism, and what has been the most profound thing that you have uncovered in this with the intellect you bear? Being an engineer to begin with, that's credentials right away for an intellect. What can you tell us? What should we know? What does the world need to know about this stuff?
Wow, great question, but a very, very deep one. We can talk about it for like 10 hours, not reaching the final answer. But what is mysticism? I'm not going to give you a formal definition, but like whatever religion we're in, let's say Christianity, Islam, doesn't matter. We have this outer aspect of religion, religious law, scripture, people follow them, and they practice their faith based on these rules. We have such and such rules in Christianity, such and such rules in Islam, and they, on appearance, they differ. But there is something that is underlying all these different traditions. Although the shapes are different, although the external masks are different, but there is like something in core connecting them. Many people would do mysticism research. They are practicing mysticism, and they would disagree with me. So I'm aware of that. Like even within philosophy, we have perennial philosophy, which acknowledges the pluralism among traditions, but they're single core, but they're shared core. But there are also other people saying, no, only one religion is, the right one. The other ones are just all going to hell, if I may use such a language. So I do not represent that kind of perspective. For me, whether you're a Christian, a Jew, or even non-Abrahamic religions, you have a say. You can follow your own tradition, in your mystical tradition, or even your religious tradition. The outer layer is going to be different. So after this long intro, what is mysticism? Mysticism for me would be the inner aspect of the tradition I'm following or other people are following. So in my case, as you know already, I'm Muslim, but I am from a minority school of thought. There is general Sunni Islam, and then there is Shia Islam. I am from Shia Islam. Even like within Shiism, there are different schools of thought: 12 Imam Shiism, Ismaili Shiism. I am from 12 Imam Shiism. Do you have any other questions?
Well, I'm curious about the cultural different aspects here with, becoming maybe part of the mystical branch, or focusing on a part of the theology that doesn't tend to sit with traditional views from the place that you're from. How do you get along? How do these groups get along in, say, a country like Iran?
Well, there are two Irans. We generally call it Iran, but same word, different pronunciation. There is, the Iran that exists, and there is the Iran on social media. And there has been lots of propaganda against not just Iran. These days, we already see what is happening all around the world. You see something with your own eyes, and then you hear something different on social media. And that has been part of what is going on against Iran. The majority of the things that you hear about Iran are not true. There is this demonic theological dictatorship in Iran going on, like suppressing people here. That's simply not true. There are limitations, I'll admit, but it's not what we hear. But coming back to your question, there are different religious people in Iran. There are Christian people, there are Jewish people, Muslim people, and even within Islam, there is, like I said, the majority in Iran is Shia Muslim, but there are also minorities like Sunni Muslim, and they are living in peace. There is no problem. What was that the question?
Yeah. So you're saying that you guys pretty much get along?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We attend their ceremonies. They attend our ceremonies. We go to church to give our respects. They come to mosques. There is no tension at all. Like what you're hearing these days about neighboring countries, there was this heavy tension between Shiism and Sunnism. That doesn't happen in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Given your studies and given what you know, are you spiritually inclined? Do you consider yourself a spiritual person or a religious person?
Amazing. Yes. How? Short answer or long answer?
Either. Your dealer's choice.
All right. Well, yes, I am a spiritual person, I would say. How did it start? That is like that inclination actually what pushed me towards studying philosophy and mysticism. I grew up in Iran. In Iran, mysticism and religion are not so detached from each other than it would be the case in many other countries. So you would see a mystic on the street, you wouldn't even distinguish that person from other people. So it's so like wired deeply into the culture, into the religion, that there is no such distinction mostly. That okay, this person is religious but not a mystically oriented person, but this person, we don't have that distinction. So naturally, we grew up with Rumi's poetry, given that we have access to his poetry in the original Farsi. Sayyid Hossein Nasr always says like this, that if you ask a beggar in Iran, they would recite Rumi's poems from memory, and that is true. So we grew up with this. It's like part of our culture. So I grew up and I was shaped to be a religious / spiritual person. But for me, there were many questions. And, when you're practicing a religion, when you're practicing a tradition, or when you grew up somewhere, you accept things without questioning mostly. But then you come to a point, you say, okay, there is this something that apparently doesn't make sense. So how do I consolidate this with my theological, cultural background? And that's what pushed me, together with my deep love for Rumi's poetry. And that's what pushed me towards philosophy and mysticism, to seek the answers to those questions. So I am both academic and practitioner.
It's interesting because I feel like there's a similar situation with our upbringing. It was Christian to the point where, when we were visiting churches when we were kids, sometimes we would go to something like a Pentecostal Christian or a church denomination that was noted for its spiritual proclivities. Like there, you might see somebody prophesy there, or you might see somebody slain in the spirit, meaning like their eyes are closed and something's happening, like spiritual activity versus what I would call like a disciplined, ritual-based religiosity. You know what I mean? Like there seems to be a distinction between spiritual manifestation and religion. You know what I mean? And it sounds like in your culture there was a lot of, like, it was just kind of mashed together and it was all sort of one thing. Like there's no distinction between mystic and religious person. But nevertheless, you start asking yourself questions, and I think that leads somebody into something like philosophy. Like philosophy is a great questioning. Like, what's really going on here? I'm not super familiar with Rumi, but I came across one of his sayings, and it was something like, I asked God, don't let me not know you before I die. Like, don't let me die without knowing you, God. And God responded, he who knows me doesn't die. Like, that cuts through everything. You can't religion that. You can't fake that, because you'd have to know what life after death is. And I'm wondering if stuff like that, like quotes like that from Rumi, penetrate. Like I can't. Has this been good for your culture? I can't imagine a culture like a lot of the religions we have access to here are so easily religible, like turned into a club. Something about Rumi's words seemed to cut to the quick about it. That's intense. I asked God, don't let me die without knowing you. And he said, he who knows me doesn't die. How do you mince that? You can't fake that. You either know it or you don't. It's experiential, not technical. Has that had a positive effect on the culture? Do you think there's a distinction between your culture and some of the other parts of the world in that way?
Wonderful question. And of course, there are many different traditions, and sometimes you're shocked on the distinctions, even with the traditions that you thought you knew. So that's an excellent question, and I can't emphasize it enough. And the reason is that it's going to bring us to the difference between Rumi, like the religion as presented through Rumi, and religion as presented through, let's say, jurists. I respect them, and they are basically the people who draw the boundaries of legal religion. Like it is following their footsteps that we arrive and we live, practice the religion. But there is more, and Rumi is that more. There is this external aspect of religion telling us don't do this or do this. And naturally, part of our nature is that we don't like rules. As human beings, we don't like to be limited by do's and don'ts, right? And so I was following and practicing these, and then was like, okay, there must be something more. And like I said, Rumi's poetry is what is more. One of the greatest things about Rumi's poetry and his thought in general is how life-oriented he is. You know, in mystical traditions, many mystical traditions, even within Islam, even within Sufism, you have all these mystics saying that, okay, worldly detachment, radical, complete, live on the mountain, live in caves, and just connect to God. Rumi does not do that. Rumi is against that. And I was shocked to my core to read that Meister Eckhart is also not like that. So I was writing this paper to this famous journal, Religions. I was asked to examine asceticism and worldly detachment from the perspective of Rumi and Meister Eckhart. I knew Rumi's answer, and we're going to discuss this in detail a little bit. But my perspective towards Meister Eckhart was right the opposite. Like I thought, okay, he's going to say monasticism alone, which I respect. Please don't get me wrong, but I thought that's what he's going to say. And then I came across, like I started doing research more on Meister Eckhart, and I came to this text. He says, if God is with you, even if you're within the society, among people, God is with you. Mm-hmm. But if God is not with you, if you're in a cave, God is not with you. That is wonderful. Yeah. That is magnificent. Yeah. And that is also Rumi. It's like he's like, you cannot distinguish Rumi and Meister Eckhart there. Rumi's teachings are hardcore wired into social life and religious life. And that is amazing. Communal life, I mean. And that is the like mostly outer aspect, but he's also very much pushing you towards self-knowledge. And again, this is part of Islamic mysticism. We have this like narrative from the Prophet of Islam saying, anyone who knows their self knows their God. And Rumi's thought is basically colored by this. You cannot find a page, I would dare say, with a little bit of exaggeration, from Rumi's verses that does not talk about self-awareness, self-knowledge, knowing yourself. So that was a general answer, background to your question. If you could specify it, I would be more than happy to elaborate.
Did people like Rumi? Like that might sound like a really naive and revealing question I just asked, but I'm thinking about Jesus. It's like you might even say people like Jesus, but they killed him in the end. And you might say people liked Buddha, I don't know, but he seemed to live kind of antithetical to the, like he left the kingdom to go seek this stuff out. You know what I mean? I don't see him being placed back on a throne afterwards. And I'm just curious about Rumi, because that statement, if you got God with you, you can be with the people and God will be with you. If you don't have him, even in a cave, God won't be with you. And I go, well, what do the people think of that? Doesn't that matter? You know what I mean? If you search inward and you see that, like, I do love the world. I do care about being part of this world. I don't want to just go be in a cave with God by myself. I care about people. Did Rumi clash? Was he Van Gogh? Van Gogh, everybody hated him in his life. And then when he died, they raided his tomb and hailed him. A lot of these guys in their time are so misunderstood. I'll stop talking now. I'll let you answer.
No. You outlined that question very well. And no, Rumi was and is very popular within the tradition and culture because, like I said, given that you grow up in that culture, it becomes like is solidified within you. But there were some radical people, of course, especially, again, I'm going to come back to jurists, but I'm not generalizing. Some jurists dismissed and still continue to dismiss spirituality, saying, no, there is no such thing, and it's just like external rules. Do this, don't do that. That's the entire religion. And Rumi is not okay with them. He says, look, your practice, your religion is transactional. You're doing this to go to heaven. You're avoiding this to go to hell, not to go to hell. And he says, look, go do whatever you like. And he's exactly using such terms. Just go do whatever you like. If that is your understanding of your religion, do whatever it is that you want to do.
Right.
That's not what I'm going to be doing. And then he comes, you're going to ask, okay, what does Rumi say? He's establishing this relationship with God, but not the God that says do and don't. And he says, okay, I will not do that. He says, I will not do that, but in a different way that injects his teaching into your core. And that is love. His love poetry come in. He says, God, I'm not doing this because you ask me directly as a do, as a rule. I'm not avoiding this because you're going to punish me in hell. I'm doing this, or I'm avoiding this because I love you. I'm going to recite something in Persian. It just came to my mind. Rumi says, وگر از ناز او گوید برو از من چه میخواهی ز سودای تو میترسم که پیوندد به من سودا برم تیغ و کفن پیشش چو قربانی نهم گردن که از من درد سر داری مرا گردن بزن امدا. If my beloved, and when he says beloved, he means God. If my beloved tells me, go away, I'm afraid that your love madness might stain me, I would take a shroud and a sword, go in front of him and say, either kill me or show yourself. تو میدانی که من بی تو نخواهم زندگانی را مرا مردم به از هجران به والله کخرج الموتى. I would say, you know that I cannot live without you. I wouldn't want life without you. You see what is happening? He's establishing this mystic, romantic-looking love relationship with God. And he says, look, say me die and I will. Tell me do this, I will. Tell me not to do this, I will do that. Not because of rules. I don't care about rules. He's quite rebellious, quite like Shams Tabrizi. He says, I'm in hopelessly and redeemingly in love with you. And that's what I'm doing. And that's connecting it back to your question. That's what attracted people. And that's what continues to attract people. People don't like rules, but people like love. Doesn't matter which tradition you're in. You're in Christian, your love is wired into your tradition. You're in Islam, you go after these mystics because they are like taking God from that cruel looking context, making him your divine beloved, as says Rumi, and as the other Islamic mystic Sufi poets. We call God the divine beloved, and that changes like the framework. That changes everything, changes equations. You're living, even your daily life. Let's say you're giving. I always give this example. You're giving this glass of water to someone, and what do the religious people do? Those with superficial understanding. I'm doing this to gain, I don't know, as if there's like this positive point. If you do this, you're going to go to heaven. Rumi does not do that. Rumi says God is manifested in the world, because we have this in the Quran and also in Christianity, that God is permeated in the world through his spirit, whatever that nature may be. That's too philosophical. But God is present in the world. And more specifically, God is present in the human being through their soul. So human beings are divine. The entire world is divine. Environment is divine. You're connecting with them. You're talking, you're behaving in a way, you're talking to God. So I'm giving you this glass of water with utmost respect. You're a divine being. I'm approaching a tree with utmost respect and care, because that is a part of divine manifestation. And that's what Rumi does to you.
It's so interesting. At some point I was going to ask, well, what is love? But you kind of broke it down well there. For some reason it brought all kinds of, you want to hear something bizarre? A verse came to mind, a Christian verse, which was, better is open rebuke than hidden love. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I always chewed on that. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Something bad about hidden love. And I think about our tendency towards superficiality and our tendency towards pretension and polite culture and all this. And it can be heavy. It can get to the point where you're like, is there even anybody real around? I'm not connecting with anybody. Everything is so robotic and polite. But, and this is, I'll just wrap it up with this. You know, I was driving around with somebody the other day, and they were asking about struggling with what they should do with their life. And I said, well, don't ask yourself what you would do if you won the lottery. That's such a deluded illusion, you know what I mean? What would you do if you won the lottery? I said, what would you do if there was no other humans on the planet? And the conversation sort of got dark. It's like, no matter how negative you are, it's like, it's one thing if you're the real deal and you almost can't even communicate, if you're the type of mystic that goes off and feels satisfied being totally alone. That's its own thing. We can barely even talk about that. But for a typical person, it's like, what would you do if there were no other people? To be stark, you know, like, I think the answer is most people would probably kill themselves, despite the fact that sometimes it's so hard with these other humans. Look at how barbaric we are. Look at all the stuff going on in the world. So where's the love in that? Where can we conjure love in that? It's something about what you're saying seems to touch on that to me. Godly love in the midst of all a pessimistic, you know, cynical world, violent world sometimes, crazy world. And it's in us too. You know, you can't always just project it outwards. You got to recognize it in yourself. How do we get to that? How would you guide someone to the fastest route so that not just you've become some mystic that's by yourself, but it like becomes really poignant among others when you're with people? God's with you. How do you solidify that? How do you be the type of person that God's with even when they're with people?
Wow, you ask all these tough questions.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm just desperate to know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, amazing questions. First of all, what is love? You said you're going to ask.
Yeah.
And Rumi says, following other mystics like Ibn Arabi, who is considered like the father of mysticism, Sufism, they both say you cannot define love. So
Yeah.
that's the short answer.
That's good.
You cannot say. Ibn Arabi says, if you say love is such and such, apparently you have not understood what love is. Rumi puts that, rephrases that. He says, love it is only love that can define love. They're approaching in a negative sense. We're going to say, okay, what does that mean? So how do I know what love is? Then they're going to start talking about their effects, like love's effects. Rumi has this famous poem. He says, if my memory aids me, خنکان قماربازی که بباخت آنچه بودش بنماند هیچش الا هوس قمار دیگر. Blessed is the gambler who has lost everything, and nothing remains except one thing: the passion to play again. What is he trying to say here? He's saying,
don't say that at a Gambler Anonymous meeting.
Yeah. Well, he says, and he puts it in different ways in his other poems as well. Let me actually give this, and then I'm gonna connect them.
I love it, by the way. I love that, what you said.
You're gonna love the next one more. He says, I went to this gambling house and I saw that people are gambling. I asked them, what are they doing? And my friend, let's say, said that they are gambling. I said, on what? So they're money. And Rumi says they're kids playing. The real gamble is not with money. The real gamble is to put your entire existence on the table in front of God and say, take it. You know that without you, I wouldn't even want to live. You see, he's betting his entire existence. He says, this is real love. Mm-hmm. This is real gambling. You're gambling your entire existence. So you see, we're seeing little effects, like the influences that love brings to our life. Selflessness is one of the things that Rumi introduces love through, in front of God and in front of human beings. Then bringing that light into other people. You're going to say, you said that in a puzzling way. Rumi says, I have not come to help enlightened people. That is not my project. right opposite of what Shams Tabrizi did. Please ask me a question about that. I love to talk about that. He goes right the opposite direction with Shams Tabrizi. He says, I have come to help people who are in darkness, not who are in light.
Jesus did the same thing. Jesus said, I didn't come to save the healthy. I came to save the broken and the lost and all that.
Exactly. There are a couple of verses. I haven't memorized them, but I was reading them in the Bible, and it was like, oh, it's like amazing.
We're blessed.
yeah. See, you talked about Jesus and his blessing enlightens the room. Thank you for that. Now, yeah, I was reading Bible, and I was seeing that, oh my God, there's lots of similarities, lots of shared points with Rumi's mysticism, not with the juristic external aspect that we see in religion. So what is love? Love, to put it in most concise form, is that divine pull, that divine attraction. Is a technical definition. That divine pull, that attraction you feel in your chest, according to Sufism. God sends something to your spirit, pulling you towards himself. That's what is love. You see, that's vague. Neither you understood what I said, nor I understood what I said, in a sense. And that's love, says Rumi. You cannot define it. You have to experience that. Ask Jesus Christ, what is love? You cannot define it as something experiential, right? So that's the same what goes with Rumi. You cannot define it clearly.
By my estimation, it comes out really corrupted and effed up, because I have a saying which is, for Justin so loved the world, he hated it. Which is just wrong and backwards. But what was I going to say? Oh, so when the word selfless gets falls in there, that term gets put in every now and then. You hear selfless, and I've thought of this in the past, mentioned this before, and I think of the story, one of the many tales of Buddha in one of his incarnations, and he's walking through the jungle with his disciples, and he comes across a tiger that's trying to feed its young, but it hasn't eaten, so it has no milk, and its young are starving, and Buddha feeds himself to the tiger. And then the disciples are like, what are you doing back there? He's like, go on without me. And he feeds himself to the tiger. Like selfless can be thought of to me as like, if your enemy slaps you, let them slap you again. If somebody tries to take something, let them take it from you. But if you stand in the arena with a wild animal looking at you, that's like, yes, do that. I've known people that their only response to vulnerability and honesty is, well, you done screwed up, because now I'm definitely going to take advantage of that. And then it's hard not to be like bitter when that happens. It's, I'm like, I've said, like, I don't want to go out like Jesus. I don't want to be crucified or a martyr. I don't want to do that. There's got to be a better way. Not to mention there's something sort of potential for selfish in there. Oh, it can be selfish to be a martyr. It can be selfish to what the hell? Buddha fed himself to a tiger. What do we do now? We needed our master. You know what I mean? He cared about a tiger more than us disciples. So I just want to keep it real in the realm of selfless love, And I think that requires an honest personal reflection of the inner state. Like, what is it that you're not telling? What's going on in there? What is the orchestra within you really saying, I hope that led somewhere. Where do we go from that? Where do we go from what I just said?
I do have a question. But you can. Looks like you want to jump in. So
I want to jump in. Sorry, because he touched upon something very important. Like, if you ask me, summarize Islamic mysticism, I would say self-transcendence, and that selflessness is basically another synonym for that. So, what is love? According to Rumi, like I said, to put it generally, for Rumi, love is the divine force that emanates from the beyond and transcends reason, burns away yourself. You're going to ask, what does that mean? What that means, and I'm going to explain it a little bit, and helps you unite with the divine. So many people misunderstand this, and there is this whole concept of self-transcendence with a very wrong connotation about Sufism. They say "Fana fillah," that is the Arabic word, "Fana fillah," and its literal translation is self-annihilation. Most probably you have heard. And people think that when in Sufism we say annihilation of the self, it really means that you ontologically perish. There is no such thing. That is absolutely wrong. What is the self-transcendence? What is the selflessness that we speak in Islamic mysticism? And I have seen this in other traditions as well. Even back to ancient times, like with Plotinus, that selflessness can be defined this way. The mystic, the lover of God, the seeker, whatever you name it, is so absorbed in the divine love that at that moment, they are so absorbed that they are not aware, important, aware, epistemic. They're not aware of their individuality. They're not aware of their individual existence. They speak God, to put it poetically. That's why sometimes you see what happens with people like Hallaj. They say, "An al-haq, I am the truth," and they executed him. They thought, like, oh, this is blasphemous. So you see, there's so much that they basically dissolve into God. They unite with God, but that's not ontological. That self is there, that person is there. Epistemically, they are so absorbed, they don't see themselves. They're not aware of themselves. That's what we call a self-aware, self-transcendence. That's why I don't like the translation self-annihilation. That's very misleading. Self-transcendence is the best word. So that I thought would be a good clarification. James wanted to ask something.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah.
I was curious about the Abrahamic faiths. They all seem to have their subsect of mystical branches, whether it's Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And I'm curious about Sufism. Is it a non-dual philosophy at the end of the day, and these mystical Abrahamic sects, are they kind of like a middle ground between Eastern philosophy, or are they trying to bring it together? Because it seems like when we start looking into the experiential and the divine nature of God in all things, we might be talking about non-duality here. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and how Rumi fits into that.
Good question, but what do you mean by non-duality or duality
Well,
in the first place?
dualistic would be the idea that God is separate from. There's a distinct line between God and all of reality and His creation, where non-duality is saying that God is in everything, even the ugly, and yeah, and may not be even a distinct being in itself, just the conscious awareness of all reality.
Amazing. Yes. Well, everything goes back to jurists in my examples. I don't like that. So for jurists who do not study mysticism or philosophy or so radical as to reject them, they say, no, there is God, transcendent, and there is the created. There's the human being. How dare you say, I am the truth? They executed Hallaj, who was a Sufi mystic. They killed him just because he experienced that unity and said, I am the truth. They killed him. So there is this radical view. Again, I'm not generalizing. I'm not talking against all the jurists. I'm talking about a specific sect. For them, there is this God apparently in the heavens, in the skies, and separated from the created. And then there is the majority of the mystics in Islamic tradition. Let's start with Ibn Arabi, the father of Sufism. Most probably you have heard of the doctrine of Wahdat al-Wujud, that is the doctrine of the unity of existence, oneness of being, however you translate it. And God permeates existence through His spirit. What does that mean? We need to go back a little bit. We need to read a little bit of Plotinus. Plotinus says there is this Dewan. From Dewan, emanation starts. Dewan emanates, creating intellect. The intellect emanates itself. very technically, we don't need to get into technicalities, and the soul come in, and then the individual souls, and then the material body. We see pretty much the same picture in Sufism, in Islamic mysticism. There is a divine essence that is absolute, non-delimited existence. In Islamic mysticism, divine essence is equal with existence, but absolute existence. What do I mean by absolute existence? There is this pen, it has existence, it has color, it has shape, it is long. We can write with this to see how do I define it? By putting it into borders, like, right? By giving it some features, saying it's red, it has color, it has such and such. Now, take its shape away from it. Take its function away from it. You see, the purer existence gets, the simpler it becomes. There is existence in the entire world, but it is defined. It is within what we are defining everything with specific words, with specific definitions. When you're transcending this existence, the higher you go, whether that is the soul, the intellect, and then going towards divine names and the divine essence, the simpler it becomes. You cannot define it. So there is this transcendental aspect of divine essence that you cannot define in Sufism. Even saying that you cannot define it is a limitation, right? You're even saying that it's transcendental, it's a limitation. So from that essence, existence, important, existence emanates, creating divine names. The first level of multiplicity is started. And from there, the corporeal manifestation of the divine names happen. So in Sufism, especially with Ibn Arabi, there are two kinds of manifestations. First, the undetermined essence of God becomes determined in his knowledge, in the ilm ilahi, as we say in Arabic. The qualities, the essences of every created being are conceived in God's mind in quotation. And then in the second manifestation, second emanation, those are reflected into material existence. So the first stage, the second stage. The first plurality is divine names. The second plurality, the second manifestation is the corporeal masks that those names put on and come into existence. So existence is one for Ibn Arabi and for Sufism. The reality is one. But what the plurality you see in the world, especially in the material world, is the result of different manifestations of different divine names. So the underlying existence is the same. What you see here is divine manifestation, but it is not pantheism saying that, look, this is God, this pen is God. Because in pantheism, in a strict radical sense, the universe is God. There is this equality, but in Islamic Mysticism, there is no equality. There is a substantial difference. God's essence is different from the created realm's essence. Then you're going to say, okay, you just said God emanates into the world. That is true, but what we have here is God's manifestation, not his essence. It's, to put it poetically, it's a reflection of God. The universe is God, says Ibn Arabi, and it's not God. What do I mean by that? So he says, the universe is God in the sense that it's a manifestation of God's essence, and it's not God in the sense that it's not God's essence. Think of it as this projector being there, reflecting something on the wall. The picture that you're seeing is at the same time what is in that projector, and it is not what is in that projector. To put it in like this simplistic example form.
Yeah. It you know what it does though? It like when you were describing it, and to be fair, you know, we're limited by speech in some way. When you say, you know, you talk about non-dualism, and you were saying you realize that God may be even all of it, even the ugly things. And the way you were describing it, you know, as we go up the elevator, there's so many different floors to get off and kind of decide that that's what it means. But at the zenith, the top of the experiential conclusion of that, I think might lead to the conclusion that, like, what if there just aren't ugly like ugly is a concept, evil is a concept, and if we're God's, if what we see here is God's reflection, if all of this manifestation is like God's reflection or emanating from God, there's just so much room there for us to get wrapped up in concept and lost and carried away with concept and distinctions. You know what I mean? They're tools. They're tools that help us move through this world, and our ability to judge and all this stuff gets us through. But it seems like if you got to where Rumi was trying to get to, which is this like desperate love affair with God, by the point you actually got there and Rumi discovered what he had maybe initially been seeking for, the distinctions of good and bad would be like so redundant. It would be like, what does that even have to do with anything? You know what I mean? And maybe that when you get that kind of thing, it makes you do peculiar things. Maybe sometimes you might feed yourself to a tiger out of just what the heckness. You know what I mean? Because I think being there might birth a state of being where you're detached from the world, but you're not suffering it. Meaning like, you might hear something peculiar said, like, I don't have a death wish. I'm not in a hurry to die, but I'm not afraid of death either, because I know God. I know them. If you want to get serious, I am God. You're God. We're God. Some of us are a little confused by that. This is God. And so I'm not frightened of something like that the way a typical person would be, in the same, but I'm also don't misunderstand. I'm not in a hurry to get out of here. There's nowhere else to go. I'm eternal already. And that just seems like a rare insight. It seems like a rare thing that, only a few people have. And then we're fascinated by them and we read over what they've said we study it. We want to know it. I want to know it. I want to be what Rumi was. You know what I mean? I'm not interested in seeking. I'm interested in finding.
How in Sufism is traditional texts like the Quran and the Hadith taken? Are they examined like literally, or are they examined experientially? Like you take it, you read it, you mull over it, and then as you live out your life, it comes to life that way. I'm curious about that.
Good. Several points during the talk I wanted to distinguish this, and I couldn't. I forgot. So let me distinguish between Sufism and Islamic mysticism.
Yeah.
Islamic mysticism would be the umbrella term, spirituality of Islam. Sufism points to the Sunni spirituality of Islam, mostly. There's also Shia mysticism, and even within Shia mysticism, there are even different angles, different perspectives. So generally, when we generalize Sufism and Islamic mysticism, it's like pushing away the other definitions of mysticism. That's why I always use Islamic mysticism and Sufism, just to clarify that. So back to your question, how do we read Quran in Islamic mysticism in general? There are radical people who just completely disregard the external aspects of religion, including the Quran in a literal sense. Quran says such and such. They might say, no, I have transcended that. I'm looking at the meaning. I'm seeking the interior, whatever that is, however we define it, and however you could reach that. But that's a very radical perspective. Then there are other people who act completely on the literal sense, and then that's the other far side. But generally, in Islamic mysticism, the Quran and the Hadith, that is the narrative tradition that comes from the prophets, and in case of Shiism, Shia imams, as the vicegerents of the prophet, their sayings are collected, documented, examined in specific books. So this narrative tradition. So considering the tradition, Quran on the one side, Hadith, narratives on the other, we start with those, we examine those, we start from the literal level. But what is happening is also what is happening with Rumi's poetry. You shouldn't be stuck in the outer layer. You can study the Quran, you can study Hadith in a linguistic sense. First of all, in a literal sense, Quran says do such and such or don't do such and such. Take it, fine, live with that. That gives you a perspective. And then let's say you're a scholar or you want to dig deeper, you want to learn more. You can study Quran linguistically. You see, there are those subtle points, not just the Quran, any spiritual text. You can dive deeper with such tools like linguistic tools. And then you say, okay, I'm going to take one further step. I'm going to study the Quran and the Hadith philosophically. I'm going to ask philosophical questions. No, that's not a philosophical text, but it doesn't mean that we cannot ask philosophical questions. It doesn't mean that we cannot examine it philosophically to understand what or who God is. You see, you entered a bit deeper, and then you say, okay, I'm not happy with that. Something is missing. Like I'm playing so much with words. Philosophy can take me to a door, can prove whether or not God exists, but it cannot open that door, right? It just can say, okay, there is such and such God with such and such nature. So what? Nothing. That was all. It cannot tell you what kind of relationship you can establish with that thing, person, individual, however you define it. Philosophy brings you to the doorstep of mysticism, and then you open the door, and that opening the door is, the mystical teachings. And then, sure, you can study the Quran and the Hadith in a mystical sense, right? For example, I'm going to give you an example. There is this famous Quranic verse, in Arabic, speaking of God, the Quran says he is the first and the last and the outward and the inward. What does that mean? You start with the literal sense, you're confused. Okay, I do not understand this, say people of faith. So God is speaking deep here. My job is to obey and move on. Then you're going to say, okay, some people are happy with that. And then you're going to say, look, there's a little bit more going on here. So let's examine it philosophically. You're going to come into all these pantheistic talks to give it depth, right? And then you're going to put it next to the narratives. And I said, okay, I understand a bit more. And then you're going to say, okay, yeah, sure. But again, combination of words. How do I experience such a thing, such an entity, even if you call it entity? Well, how can an entity be the first at the same time the last, the outward at the same time the inward? These are paradoxical terms, right? Mm-hmm. So philosophy is going to be confused here, like the rational philosophy. This is saying that you're talking nonsense, the first and the last. This is nonsense. And they are right. In a rational, purely logical form, this is nonsense. It doesn't make sense. It's paradoxical. But voila, that's the point. You arrive, I'm just simplifying it too much. You arrive at this reality that gathers in itself all the paradoxes. How do I understand that reality? How do I connect with that reality? Well, by all means, open that door. Mysticism.
There's so many terms coming to mind, like classic ones, like the mystic swims where the psychotic drowns, and notions of being able to handle paradox. And do you know who Osho is? Do you know who that is? He was Bhagwan and all that. Yeah. I find him, he was staggeringly intelligent and wise. But I saw a clip of him recently where he was talking about, there was a prominent Christian missionary at the time that was a Christian. He was a Christian missionary, and he approached Osho, and Osho was saying, the quote of the video was, "Don't quote my old stuff." And he was explaining that when he started off, he would talk about Jesus and he would talk about things, and he goes, because nobody was available. Everybody had already had a religion, and so there's no customers. So I would talk about what they knew about, right? And this Christian preacher that was famous at the time came up and said, "I've never heard somebody speak so beautifully about Jesus." And Osho's response was, yeah, I wish I could tell you the truth though. And I think about, when we get into philosophy and all this, like philosophy to me, I love it. It's what would get you out of a maximum prison, I've said before. You know what I mean? Like, what am I missing here? What is not quite right? But it will lead eventually to paradox. You will likely end up in paradox lock. And then what left is there but to experience? Just do it. You've been putting it off this whole time. You've been philosophizing, you've been learning. But nevertheless, this is a tool we use. We make these small mouth noises, and we're doing our thing as humans. Maybe God just loves people sitting around talking about him. I don't know. Because we keep doing it. We keep philosophizing. We keep pointing. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's right here. It's happening. This is it. This is it. you know?
I totally agree. Like they're like approaching God, connecting with God is in a sense evolutionary, not Darwinian evolutionary, you know what I mean? There is this Christian writer, John Hick, a philosopher, a famous philosopher, a British philosopher. He has this wonderful discussion, actually an entire book about suffering. And my PhD dissertation is about suffering from the perspective of Rumi and John Hick. So comparing Islamic and Christian perspective. If there is good God, if there is this all-powerful God, why is there suffering? Can he not prevent it, or is he not good? So this philosophical old debate, the problem of evil. He had this wonderful text. He said, our journey towards God shouldn't be taken as a sudden thing. God put us on this earth. He even accepts evolution, the Darwinian evolution. He says, God put us on this earth first as to cope with the challenges. I'm not saying that I am acknowledging the Darwinian evolution, but I'm just quoting him.
Yeah.
God put us on earth as mere animals, so that we cope with the challenges, we transcend those challenges. And then after some time, we started using some tools. And then after some times, we started doing calculus, doing philosophy, doing I'm giving everything with this pen, all examples. So I dropped this pen, it is falling, if I drop it, it's gonna fall. So you see, I'm creating a rule here, a law, a physical law. So we started creating all these laws, and then we started creating all these logical frameworks, logical rules. And then you see, we are evolving. We started with that animal self, fearing like volcanoes, and then we came little by little, creating rules, creating logic. And then we came to the point, I said, something is missing. How did I come to this world? And then I started questioning all these, right? And then the philosophy puzzled you. And we do use philosophy. I hope the audience, all the listeners and viewers do not get me wrong. Philosophy is a magnificent tool in searching for God, but it is but a tool. You shouldn't be approaching it as an end. And John Hicks says we used it as a tool. We came to a certain point, but it's not enough. It doesn't make sense. Something is missing. So what is that thing? And then God opens the doors, he says, and say the Quran. The Quran says, we have put signs in the horizon and within yourself. I have put my signs, he says, in the created world, in the cosmos. Look at it. I look at it, I don't see it. He says, no, not that quickly. Bother yourself a little bit. Show some effort, then I will open the doors. You will look at the tree and you will see the God behind it. And I have put signs within yourself. So know yourself to know your God. So you see, there's this double picture here. God has put the signs in the created world and within ourselves. So there is this journey you need to take. And in that journey, we kind of start with literalism, taking every word that the Quran says, taking every word that the Bible says. You can delve deeper, you can talk about philosophy, but you see, something is missing, something is not quite right. And that what is missing is a God that connects with you in an experiential level. And there, mysticism comes in, however you define it, with whatever name or tradition you know. That was a thunder. There is this whole discussion in philosophy of religion, religious pluralism, and there's also mystical pluralism. Is there only one religion that leads to God? Is there only one mysticism that leads you to God? There are different views. You invited me to this podcast to give my answer. My answer is no, there is no one and one alone path to God. There are different traditions. Act upon them, you will end up in good hands. Yes, each of us act per a particular tradition, right? So by default, we prioritize that tradition, but it doesn't mean that other ones are false. Even in Islam comes and acknowledges Judaism, acknowledges Moses as a prophet, acknowledges Christianity, acknowledges Jesus as a prophet. The Quran says, treat the Christians as your brothers and sisters. Look at this verse. Treat the Christians as your brothers and sisters. What does that tell you? If that entire tradition is wrong and deserve to be beheaded, as that ISIS was doing, so why does God tell me to treat them as brothers and sisters? Oh, brother, come here, I'm going to behead you. It says a lot about what we are seeing these days that are being done by some radical, I wanted to use a word, but I won't, not very smart people, let's say, doing certain things under the name Islam and insulting people from other traditions. Just absolute nonsense. There are different ways. Take whatever you will. Act upon those principles and you will arrive at the same God that the Muslims will arrive.
Wow. I was curious, we've talked a lot about Rumi and your life exploration of kind of Sufism and some of these philosophies. I'm curious on a personal level, for however much you're comfortable sharing with us, have you had any mystical experiences or great epiphanies during maybe some practice that you were doing? Is there anything you'd like to share about that?
Well, that's a dangerous question, and I'm going to give you a puzzling answer. There is this famous poem in Persian. It says, anyone who has experienced that, their mouth are sealed. If you speak, you're not going to get that. If you disclose, you're not going to get that. Wow, it's raining here. So you see, God was not happy with me sharing. So let's generalize that, not just with me. Doesn't matter what tradition you're in, but let's go with Sufism. Let's go with Islamic Mysticism. If you act upon the external principles and rules of your religion, you will find your way into those spiritual depths. Yes, you will experience. And I'm going to give you an example. If we have a God who have created all of us, he should be the same God everywhere. The God of the philosopher who have spent 50 years going through painstaking argument, arriving at that door, and then God opens that door, say, okay, you have been playing with words so much, come in. Good job, but there was more. Okay, I opened the door, now you can experience it. But there's also this shepherd on the mountains who does not know what even an argument is. But the same God is the creator of that person. So how does that happen? There's this divine, what we call in Sufism, unveiling, a self-disclosure of God, a manifestation of God. God shows himself. God makes that person experience him, even if that person is not philosophically inclined. The same God speaks to the philosopher in different level and speaks to a shepherd in different level. So sure, you're going to get experience that. But how you experience it is one thing. How you interpret it is another. Let's say we get the same mystical experience, both of us at the same time. There's no way to measure this, but let's say it is hypothetically. It's exactly the same. What did we experience? How you're going to interpret this is going to be different from how I am going to be interpreting this. Cultural, traditional, geographical differences, frameworks. And then we're going to come into whether that experience itself was valid. In Sufism, we have different kinds of divine unveilings, different kinds of, let me put it this way, mystical experiences. Some mystical experiences are divine, but some others are true but satanic. You're connecting, but you're not connecting to God. You're connecting to satanic forces, and they have power. They have power to manipulate to your thoughts. They have power to manipulate your dreams. Even prophets read the Quran, even on other traditions, says Prophet Joseph was in the prison, and then such and such thing happened, and then he was going to send this message to the king, and then he forgot, and then Joseph asked him what happened. He said, oh, Satan might have taken it out of my mind. They have the power to manipulate your mind. They have the power. Of course, there are some rules of games, but they have the power to manipulate your dreams and your mystical experiences. So there must be a framework so that we can judge whether that experience was valid. All too academic I sound right now, I'm aware, but how we approach interpreting these experiences are going to be different.
And all
so
the while,
long, annoying answer to your personal question.
No, it's great.
And all the while, psychology, cultural mores, biology, these are all playing a factor. You know what I mean? Like in the early stages of looking into enlightenment, I used to ask questions like, well, what happens if a moron gets enlightened? Or what happens if can a serial killer get enlightened? Can, you know, like, I'm not posing that as a serious question now, but I'm saying, wouldn't it matter? Like, there's enlightened masters that talk with an accent. It's like, well, if he's got God consciousness, why can't he talk with it? It's because everything is filtered through this meat vessel. Either way, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that there's not fruits that you can see depending on what somebody knows or doesn't know. But I do think that, you know, that point that I was illustrating earlier, that if you understand something experientially, that and you've alluded to too already, is how the heck are you supposed to talk about it? It's going to come through some kind of language and be interpreted as it will. You know what I mean? I sort of believe things like a lot of our contemporary notions of love are like inventions. Like, we invented it. You got Shakespeare and you got all this stuff. We invented romance. We invented bad. We invented good. If you look at nature, you know, you've got like a trail camera and you're looking at it and you're seeing creatures eating each other and stealing each other's young, and volcanic eruptions and galactic explosions. The universe is seemingly like chaotic. What's the morality in it? You know, humans, you know, it's maybe a little different for us. We're evolving and we're reaching upwards towards something. But I think when you get to that thing you're reaching for, you've left language long behind. You know what I mean? You're not going to take your petty little distinctions with you about good and bad. You know what I mean? And I don't know what that means. I don't know if that literally means there could be a serial killer that's enlightened or whatever. I don't care really that much. You mentioned a name earlier, or a phrase or something, and you were like, don't let me forget that. I want to talk about that. Do you remember that?
I can't remember you saying that. I just can't remember the name.
Shams Tabrizi. Thank you for reminding me. Shams Tabrizi, Rumi's life-changing master. And before that, I wholeheartedly agree with what you said. Yes, we arrive at a point. Up to that point, language matters. Up to that point, rationality matters. Not that you get irrational at that point, but you transcend it. There is this ineffability in mystical experiences. You experience something that you cannot even put into words, and that is a feature of these higher realms, higher realities, however you define them. And coming to Shams Tabrizi, Shams Tabrizi was this strange person who came and changed Rumi's life forever. Rumi was this very respected scholar. He was the imam, which is the leader of Muslims, of a mosque. He was saying the prayers, and people were, in a way, like in a monk, like a monk. So, like
priest, pastor, monk.
Priest. Yeah, sorry. So, in a sense, Rumi was the priest for Christian people, right? And he was this formal person, dressing very formally, coming from a very scholarly family, an affluent family. They were rich. His father was this famous scholar, and he had exposure to mysticism, Sufism, yes, but he was a scholar. But all of a sudden, he comes to that point. You see, he starts questioning. Something does not make sense. Something is missing. I have been going through all these rules, all these laws, but something is missing. He says in a poem, talking to Shams Tabrizi, but he's not really talking to Shams. And this is one of the points people misunderstand him. At times he's having a dialogue with Shams, but he's having a dialogue with God. On that mirror that is Shams, he sees God's image on Shams Tabrizi. And he is speaking to Shams, but he's not speaking to Shams, he's speaking to God. He says, جستجویی در دلم انداختی تازه جستجو روم در کوی تو. You initiated a search in me. You put that fire, you ignited that fire in me. So as a result of that fire, you pulled me towards yourself. جستجویی در دلم انداختی. You initiated a search in me. تازه جستجو روم در کوی تو. So that through that search, I come to your doorstep. So Rumi says, I was begging God for some time. I was begging God for some time. Send someone. I want to know you more. I'm not happy with knowing you through rules. I'm not happy with knowing you through books. Send someone. I'm interpreting his literal words. Not just my ideas. It says, بس بگفتم کو وصالو کو نجا برد این کو مرا در کوی تو. So much I said, where is he? Where is that help? He means, where is he? Where is he? So that this where is, all these questions, all these beggings, all these nightly prayers led me to you. پس بگفتم کو مثالو کو وجا برد این کو مرا در کوی تو. All these questions led me to you. You see, it's creating a poetic paradoxes here. From one angle, it is him who is searching for a guide, who's asking for a guide to reach God. And all of a sudden he says, you put that search in me. What happened? So which one should we take, Rumi? See, alluding to the paradoxical nature of all these experiences. Rumi says, I was begging God for help. And then Shams Tabrizi came. Shams Tabrizi comes and gives us another narrative. And that is magnificent. You see, we didn't know Shams Tabrizi much before. We only knew him through Rumi's poems. And then we discovered his discourses, Shams Tabrizi's own words. And then several editions came cleansing all the errors, typo errors. And in Farsi, in the original language, we have those discourses. And through these discourses, we now understand who Shams was. We know what he looked like. We know what his thought was. We know his educational background. I actually started an entire video series on this. First, he's a very misunderstood person. In the West, people think of him as this illiterate sheikh who came and did some magical work to spell on Rumi. That's just nonsense. Shams was an educated person. He was a scholar. We see it in his own words. Please watch that video. That's going to be helping a lot, shedding light on who Shams Tabrizi is. He was a scholar, yes, but he was hardcore into mysticism, into the inner aspects of Islam. But he was a scholar. He came, and I was going to bring the point to this point. He said, Rumi, you thought that I came to you. You asked and I came. He doesn't say it explicitly. He's saying it differently. I'm interpreting. He said, look, they told me from the beyond. They told me from the unseen world that there is this soul in such and such place who is yearning. And I was praying to God, this is Shams saying himself, I was praying to God, introduce me to one of your friends so I can help him. They told me in a dream about you, that you are in Konya city, but they told me you're not ready yet. You're not going to be receptive, so I should wait. And I waited. And interestingly, reading that work and reading other works, we see that they have actually met before. They have met in Damascus. Rumi sees Shams Tabrizi and immediately recognizes the spiritual powers, grabs him by his hand, saying, oh, the measurer of the world, will you help me? I said this in video, and I'm saying it again. I don't know whether the word measurer makes sense in English, but in Farsi, it means someone with very sharp judgment. And someone knowing their way around, someone very knowledgeable. takes Sam saying, will you please help me? Sam says, he thinks, and they have told him, you're not ready. He disappears. Rumi even cannot find him to talk to him. And he was this strange person. He didn't let people know who he is, what his powers are. And this was the point I emphasized earlier. Rumi says, I have come to help people. He says, I don't care about that. Sam says, I have not come to help the masses. That is not my project. I have come to transform the sheikhs. I have come to transform the perfect man. Men in literal, not in literal sense, technical term. I have come to help the guides. I have come to transform the phoenixes in a poetic way. So I say that's the difference between Shams Tabrizi and Rumi.
Interesting. You were right to say that guy's interesting, because what the heck? He's like, what is he on another level? Even higher than Rumi?
He's, sense, strange person, I'll admit. He says, he's brutally frank, straight. He says, I haven't come for this for these masses.
Right.
I don't care what they think. Oh, come on, just calm down.
That's the guy. That's the guy who's kind of ushering in Rumi's development. Is a guy that goes, I don't care about the masses, which is a weird thing that happens, right? I don't know if you know who. I know James has a question. Sorry, James.
No.
It reminds me of Neem Crowley Baba. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was an odd mystic that lived in I think India, and there's footage of him, very little audio of him, and he was weird. Like he was odd in the way that people would gravitate toward to be around him, but stories would come out like he can be in more than one place at once. And he was almost childlike in his messages. They were not learned discourses. They were real simple. Like they'd be like, what can we do? And he'd be like, feed people. And he would just hang out in a blanket all day and really shuffle around and just an odd mystical person. And I think he would tell people, he would tell his followers, don't go telling people about all the stuff I'm doing here. Why is it sometimes that these the guys that are the most mystical are hiding or something? You know what I mean? They don't care to even. They might say something peculiar like, "I don't care about the masses." Rumi cared about the masses, obviously. Why didn't this guy? Weird. Just something to chew on.
Missions are different.
What's that?
Their missions, their missions are different.
Yes.
Sham said, "I am sent to take the hands of very specific select people."
Yeah.
Rumi says, no, I have come to help the needy.
Yeah. Rumi probably more likable. You had a question.
Yeah, well, I have a couple questions, but I'm curious about these philosophies for the modern day culture that we're living in now. How do you see them as relevant for this world, considering the global climate and everything that's going on? What about these Rumi's philosophies you think are something tangible that we can hold on to and use in a time such as this?
Wonderful point. And I'm so happy that you asked that, because that is the logic, the rationale behind my YouTube channel. You can approach mysticism, you can approach philosophy in a very abstract way, and they have so much to give you. You can spend your whole life on those abstract topics without being able to use them in your life. There are also scholars and mystics who speak so much in a knowledge-based way that you can't live those. Ibn Arabi, for example, is so knowledge-based, is so gnosis-based. Is not. So he, of course, has writings on how to live all these, but his mission is different. And this is why I love Rumi. His mysticism is a path that you can live it. It's not about abstract spirituality. And the central thing I have been trying to do on my channel is bringing Rumi's teachings into our contemporary life today. I start with a poem. Rumi says such and such. These are the assumptions. These are the implications for his time. But how about now? I'm living in 2025 now. How do I live this? So forget about all these abstract topics and discussions. What should a person living in New York do about all these teachings? And Rumi is your guidance. If you want to be a learned person in spirituality, go after Ibn Arabi. If you want to live them, practice them, go after Rumi. Rumi is your guy. Rumi's mysticism is a real life mysticism. He brings God not to your mind, not to your just heart, but to your life, your everyday life. You're going to live God whatever it is that you're doing, doesn't matter. Wherever it is that you're doing, whatever tradition it is you're doing, you're practicing, is going to bring it into your life.
You know what's real? Sometimes the answer is, I don't want to live God. I want to know it. Sometimes that's like the response that somebody, if they're being honest, would really give. I want to know the practical. I don't want to know the experiential.
Then go for Ibn Arabi.
I know.
He will tell you all about it.
Yeah.
You can spend life. Sorry, you can study life on Ibn Arabi if you want to know God, know in theoretical sense. But if you want to know and live, then combine Ibn Arabi with Rumi. You will have a fantastic couple.
Cool. Yeah. Well, that's good. That's a positive way to look at it.
Yeah.
In terms of Rumi's literature, is it just poetry, or did he have like lectures or teachings or anything? Is it all poetry?
Yeah, no. The majority of his writings are poetry. We have the different collections. One is famously Masnavi, and the other one is what is called Divan-i Shams Tabrizi, also called Divan-i Kabir. Shortly Divan. We don't need to worry about semantics. But there's also another word called Fihi ma Fih. And it is, in a sense, like Meister Eckhart's sermons. It's prose. There is this poetic melody in it, but it's prose. There are more ethical teachings. And I'm going to give you one example from that work. You see how wonderful it is. And he talks about marriage. He says, there are some traditions that say, go live on the mountain, live a monastic life, detach yourself from the world in a radical sense. But the Prophet Muhammad said, the Prophet of Islam said, God showed me a different way. Practicing religion in a societal way. And the best way of it is reflected through marriage. What does that mean, you're going to ask? And Rumi says, look, living on a mountain, living in a cave is easy. Take your food, and now you can take your jeep and go to this mountain and live there. Wonderful, no distraction, experience life, experience God. What is difficult is trying to stay connected, stay focused when there is someone who's getting on your nerves. When there is a kid who says dad 1,000 times, you cannot concentrate. There is someone you love her or him, and then there are times that you run into challenges, right? And will you stay connected? That's your true faith, says Rumi. Think of your significant other as a self-cleanser, he says. There will be times that you will have life's difficulties. Will you be able to cope? Those are more difficult than living in a cave, right? Having a child is much more difficult than living in a cave.
That's my criticism of all institution, you know, like sometimes, and I don't want to be disrespectful, really, but I just want to also kind of get to the truth. And it's like I lump a lot of institutions together. Like prison to me is similar to a monastery, is similar to the military. Like you go there and you learn discipline, you learn solitude, you learn a bunch of stuff that seems similar through those things. But there's a way of looking at that too, where some of them are voluntary. You're voluntarily going to like narrow your focus, and some of them are, you were so crazy and chaotic that we're going to do it for you. You're going to go here and you're going to be a number now, not a person anymore, and you're going to do this. But they're a monastic, thing to reorient you. And there's, in all of them, there seems to be rife with opportunity for solitude and like, and getting to something. That's as much as I'll say about it. But there's a term to me that is poignant, which is like the reality comes through not in the good times, but in like the difficulty, like how you are. You're tested by how you are when things become a bit rough. You know what I mean? That's when the reality of the situation becomes apparent. Not, you know what I mean? Like you could talk to somebody who's on a beach with a martini. You know what I mean? They're going to be like, I'm in paradise. Everything's paradise. It's like, are you sure? You know what I mean? What about when you're juggling 3 crapping babies and, you know, getting nagged at it, getting yelled at for even trying your best? That's hard.
Not sleeping at night.
So many things. So many things are a spiritual bypass. So many things are in reality a spiritual bypass. But I don't think the availability of God is ever not there. I think that in any one of those scenarios, I think it's like almost a Zen principle. It's like, it's there. It's God's there. It's in that. It's just a matter of whether you can see it or not. And I don't even know who decides. I don't even know who decides whether or not they're going to see it. That's why I think wise people come to the conclusion sometimes where they say, go and do this then. Go search this path. They're all just paths. They're all leading to, you know, and you see what works. See which one works for you, you know? That gets you to that thing that's not quite satisfied yet.
Well, Rasul, I want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show today. This has been an amazing conversation. The time's gone fast.
Oh, yeah.
It's been
Jeez Louise.
Just fascinating stuff you've shared with us today. I thought maybe to just close things out, if you have one last thing that you want to say, maybe it's an overarching message. I know you've kind of touched on your channel a bit there. We'll give you the last word, and then if you want to let our audience know where they can find you, what you got going on and all that good stuff, we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, Justin. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. Amazing questions, amazing topics, like your other videos. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I hope your audience will get some use from my prattling. And well, you asked a difficult question. Ending remarks. Like I said, there are spiritual paths and they are equally valid and you can follow them. But if you're interested in someone who is not caught up in those differences, who is able to transcend the differences, different traditions, even different religions, who respects other prophets, and who can bring mysticism into your life, help you live it, who can bring God into your life, read Rumi. And you will be amazed. He changed my entire life, and he will do the same to you. Nobody transforms my states, my moods, I mean, as strong as Rumi does. He's amazing. He's unbelievable. I can give you 1,000 pages of arguments convincing you on something, and then maybe I can convince you. Rumi does that with one couplet. How does he do that? He does, of course, mostly through poetics, right? He says, look, I'm going to engage your reason, but I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to engage your emotions. I'm going to engage your imagination. He gives you all sorts of imaginative poetry. You see Jesus Christ, you see Moses, and then you see a story that didn't take place. It's imaginative poesis, as we call it technically. And he puts you into a story, he puts you into a dialogue, let's say you're having with your heart or you're having with God, and then he transforms you. He doesn't just inform you. This is very, very important. He transforms you within that story, that dialogue, and that is incredible. So I suggest that you read Rumi. That will be my ending remark.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.